Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. Today is Saturday, February 10th, 2018. We are in Season 3, Episode 6. Our show can be found around the web at wolfman.com, barefootbushcraft.com, aroundthecabin.com, Freemizer Radio, Canadian Preppers Network, Prepper Survival Homestead, American Prepper Network, survivalcentral.net, iTunes, and many other fine websites. I'm your host, the Wolfman. In today's episode, we are going to talk about someone whose car fell into an icy river, the Endomondo fitness tracking software, and speak to our special guest, the first woman from South Africa to climb both sides of Mount Everest, Cathy O'Dowd. So welcome everyone to another episode of the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. It is a blustery day outside. It is lots and lots of snow in the Niagara region. I don't know where it's like where you are listening from. We have tons and tons of snow here, which is fantastic. If you are a dog musher like myself, you can go out there and get your dogs on the trails. In our area, there's lots and lots of great flat ski trails. Usually, if you're looking for ski trails for either cross-country skiing, snowmobiling, or, in my case, dog sledding, a good thing to look up is rail trails. Now, I don't know if everyone is familiar with this, but rail trails were trails that usually run through urban areas and cities and, of course, the country that were originally rail trails for trains. So they've removed the tracks, they've removed the supporting structures, the big ties, they're called, and then they're just laid to waste. So a lot of times, most municipalities will turn rail trails into functioning hiking trails. The most unique thing about this is that trains can't go up hills. So if you are on a rail trail, it will never be more than a 1% grade. So that's really great for walking in winter. It's great for skiing. It's great for snowmobiling. It's great for dog sledding. The only thing I do find is in the summertime, like a 3 to 5 kilometer trail that's all just sort of flat. And it gets a bit boring. But they are great in winter, and they go through some really, really fantastic areas. So look up some rail trails in your area if you want some winter fun. Lots of great stuff out there. I want to remind you to check out the annual Preppers Meet at ontariopreppersmeet.ca or ontariopreppers.ca. That is July the 6th, 7th, and 8th, just outside of Owen Sound. It's a pretty great organization to go and meet. You'll meet all kinds of amazing people, all kinds of great seminars, everything from archery to axe throwing to, this year they're even doing some skills like if you forgot your keys, if you lost your keys on a hike, how do you hotwire your car? So some pretty great stuff going to be there this year. So with that, we are going to move on to our first segment.
In the news.
So in the news today, we are going to talk about something that was listed in the Niagara Falls Review on Friday, February the 9th, 2018. And it says, vehicle partially submerged in Niagara River. Emergency personnel were called into the area of the Niagara Parkway near the South Service Road in Chippewa about 1:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday for the report of a car in the water. Niagara Falls firefighters and Niagara Parks Police and Niagara Regional Police officers, along with the Marine and Underwater Search and Recovery Unit, were also attended. The car was partially submerged, said NRP spokesman Phil Gavin. He said there was a lone occupant observed in the car. The occupant was removed from the vehicle and transported to a local hospital. Officer Gavin said that the person's condition was unknown at the time. He said the car was 10 meters offshore when it was discovered. Gavin said when, how, and why the car entered the water remains under investigation. So there's very, very few details on this article. including, it doesn't even say, not that it's relevant in any way, but it doesn't say if it's a male or female in the car. It doesn't say how the car ended up there. It just basically says vehicle went in the water. Now, vehicles as a rule are not designed to be submerged in water unless you have a specifically designed and equipped vehicle, Jeep with a snorkel and all that sort of stuff. However, this is really scary. Can you imagine you're minding your own business in your car, and all of a sudden it flips off the road and it goes into the water. So the water, of course, in northern frigid climates, just a couple of degrees above freezing, right? So it's going to be maybe between 2 and 5 degrees Celsius. The vehicle is going to hit the water. You're going to, obviously, the engine is going to flood and it's going to go out. And then that could mean your electrical system might fail. You might not be able to open the windows. And if anyone is familiar, the Niagara River, of course, is host to Niagara Falls, a very, very high volume, one of the world's most well-known waterfalls. So you're not going to want to be out there too long before eventually your vehicle will either submerge into the water, which there is about, I think it's about 10 to 12 meters deep around the edges, and about 20 meters deep in the middle, so your car can get completely submerged. Super high current, so if you get into the water itself, it's moving very, very fast. Now, something to know about water in general is that when the human body is in a body of water, it will lose heat 250 times faster in running water than it will on land. So basically, if you can stay out for 250 minutes on land with no wind before you get cold, in the water, 1 minute. So always have to sort of be careful with that. So these kind of situations can happen to anyone at any time of any skill level. It doesn't matter whether you're in a big, huge tractor trailer or you're in a Jeep or if you're in a lowly Honda Civic that just barely makes it up the road in this weather. Of course, you have to consider as well that this person probably was unable to call for help because where's their mobile phone, right? For the most part, in your car, your mobile phone is either on the seat beside you or in a pocket. It generally won't be in an area where it's going to be high up in the cabin, right? It's not on the roof. It's not going to be you're not going to dangle it from your rearview mirror. So your phone is going to be out the moment you hit the water. So it's an interesting situation to think about, to prepare for, from a bushcraft and survival point of view. Obviously, there's no bushcraft involved. You're not going to be, using a bow drill to start a fire when your car's in the water. But from a purely survival perspective, you sort of have to think of how would you handle that situation. How would you, if your car goes in the water, handle that situation when the car is floating away? Of course, the easiest thing you would probably think of doing is trying to get yourself out of the vehicle into that water and towards shore, even if the water is very, very fast moving, if it's on an angle. But imagine the situation if you had your children in the car or your dogs in the car or, incapacitated partner of some sort, right? And your wife or your mom or something, where you're not just going to be able to ditch the vehicle. So it's really, really scary. Very unique and unusual situation to find yourself in. It happens in the world all the time. It's just one of those very strange things that you're like, how would I handle that if I was in that situation? This person's, the police reports that this person was alone. Is alone being easier? Or would it be harder if you had children or elderly or whatever with you? Can you swim? So always think about these situations. Very, very unique. I suppose myself personally, if I was alone, I would have tried to exit the vehicle and get to shore. But it said partially submerged, so who knows, maybe the vehicle was stuck on the bottom, right? If it was not actually floating down the river, that's going to make your situation a lot better. You could get out and stand on the roof, wait for help. Obviously, without mobile phone coverage, because your phone would probably be submerged, that's not going to be an option to just whip out your phone and call for help. Even if you had something like a citizen band radio or something like that, if for some reason there's others listening on the radio, it probably would also be submerged. So in this situation, you're probably best, from what we hear, assuming the vehicle, it says it was partially submerged. If you can exit the vehicle and you're not injured from the entry into the water, try to get on the roof and wait up there, right? Very, very precarious situation. Again, all of the things that you would think of as tools to assist you, which would be like blankets and candles and flashlight and extra socks and all the things you would carry in a first aid kit or a winter survival kit, don't really apply here. And that would simply be because all that stuff is usually going to be in a lower level in the car, right? If you have in the trunk or the boot of your car, you have a gym bag filled with like extra wool socks and a flashlight and candles and ferro rod and Ziploc bag with dry tinder in it and all kinds of stuff like that. Or maybe your vehicle is equipped with a CB radio or an FRS band walkie-talkie, all that sort of stuff. Well, what's going to happen now when that's all under the water and you can't get to, even if you could get to it, it's not that useful. So very, very precarious situation. Again, it depends on how the person was dressed as well, right? Many individuals, if they're going just from the car to the house or the house to the car, they won't dress in an appropriate manner to be outside for any matter of time. Very, very, very common to see women of all ages, when they go into clubs, they will wear those high heel sandals in the middle of winter, no jacket, tank top, or whatever, completely unprepared to be outside for any length of time whatsoever when it's minus 10, minus 12 outside. And, people see this, myself included, all the time during, various club nights. So it's certainly something to consider. And again, is it practical to wear your big mucklucks and your Canada Goose down jacket when you're only going for a short trip? Probably not. So always something to consider, always something to think about. So that is your thought for the day, is if your car slips off the road and goes into a ditch, how would you handle it? Now, many years ago, I had read a story about a lady, I believe it was in something like a Reader's Digest type thing, of a lady, and this was a terribly tragic situation. Her car went off the bridge and into the water below, and the car had crumpled on her legs, broken her jaw, and she was up to her chest in water. It was during it wasn't that cold out like it is, it wasn't a winter situation. She was trapped down there for 4 days. If you can imagine being trapped in a car up to your chest in water, injured, broken legs, and a broken jaw for 4 days. Eventually, somebody had noticed that, obviously, family had noticed she was missing. Someone had noticed skid marks and went down there and rescued her. Unfortunately, this lady was disfigured for life for having the jaw unset and broken, and she did lose both of her legs for being broken and submerged in water for 4 days. So all kinds of strange situations we can find ourselves in. So please be careful out there, ladies and gentlemen. Again, if your car goes into the water in the frigid cold, something to always have some forethought for. That's one of the things that we try to do on the show. Preparedness, preparedness, preparedness. Always think, what could you do? What would you do if you were in that situation to try to make your situation slightly better? And the emergency personnel, all kinds of great people went to help her. We had parks police, we had regular police, we had search and rescue came out. It was very well handled. It was awesome. But again, the situation itself was very dire. And thankfully, the most important thing, there may have been some minor injuries, but the person didn't die. That's really awesome. So that's it for In the News today. We're going to now move on to our next segment.
Tips and tricks.
And in the tips and tricks section today, we're going to talk about a new revolution that's been around for about 5-10 years now, of hike tracking and outdoor tracking software. My favorite, the one that I personally use, is something called Endomondo. It's sponsored by Under Armour. It's available on on various platforms. I'm an Apple user, so I have it on my iPhone. It is also available in the App Store that other platforms use, and so it's cross-platform, which is really nice. So you can get it on Android. So anyways, how basically it works is it uses your phone's GPS system, and it basically tracks your workout and performance. That's bottom line what it does. Most people, are restricted to day hikes for 80 to 90% of what they do, myself included. As a professional outdoor instructor, I get more day hikes in than I do anything else. Same with, when I run the dogs. I'm not out there for 5 days with my dogs. I'm out there for 2 hours. So how it basically works is you turn it on, you download the software, you install it, you can create an account if you want. If you create the account, it allows you to track your historic data, which means I can see how many kilometers I've traveled in a month, how many I've traveled in a year, good months, bad months, things like that. You turn it on and it has, your duration, so how long you've been out there, your distance, which is how many, kilometers or miles if you use that old system, your average pace, all kinds of information to just sort of help you along with your hike. You can select your sport, so there's everything from like skiing, cross-country skiing, downhill skiing, canicross, hiking, all kinds of stuff. To be honest, I usually just use hiking. It's not customizable in that dog sledding is not an option, and I cannot make it an option. So basically, it is what it is, right? So for dog sledding, I'll use like canicross or something, or cross-country skiing instead. So basically, it allows you to track and keep a list of all the hikes that you've done. Now, what I love about software like this is that I can see how many kilometers every month that I hike. I like to hike, about 100 kilometers a month, and I can see how long I go. So I can set out on a chunk of the Bruce Trail or any trail in any local park, depending on where you are. You turn it on, and you do your hike, and you walk. And every kilometer, it will actually come on your screen, and it will say 1 kilometer is in X number of minutes. So it'll say like lap time and total time. Basically, the difference is, in case you're not familiar with it, is let's say you're out 4 kilometers. It will say time, 1 hour and so many minutes for 4 kilometers. Lap time, which is the last kilometer that you made. So it keeps track of both. So you know how long you've been out, how long this particular one was, how long this last kilometer was. It's really great software for that. Especially if you have individual fitness goals, or like I say, I try to hike, between 50 and 100 kilometers every single month. It's really fantastic for that. The only downside to Endomondo is that it is a pay service. There is a pay option, So you can go out, you can pay for it. I think it's like $20 or $30 a year or something. And then, like the usual, gets rid of the ads, gives you a few extra features. One of the neat things I do like about it is when you click on your workout details, it tells you how fast each kilometer was. So, your second or third kilometer was your fastest, or your first kilometer was your fastest. It tells you all your ups and downs, so your altitude, how many meters you've gone up, how many meters you've gone down. It tells you if you have either a Fitbit or an Apple Watch connected to your device, your phone, it will tell you more information, like your heart rate. It will tell you information like your hydration, so how much water your body actually processed during each hike. So it's really kind of cool. Has a lot of other features as well that I don't really use that much. Things like training programs and all that sort of stuff. But just as a hiker, I really don't mind them that much. Plus, it gives you cool little things like psychological games that it plays with you to try to make you go faster and be better. So let's say you hike 10 kilometers in 2 hours, or it'll come up. That'd be a heck of a fast hike. It will pop up and it'll be like, hey, you just set a new record. This was the fastest time. This was the longest time. This was whatever. And which is kind of neat that it does that. It's a way of encouraging you to next time to do more. So it's kind of a cool program. So again, to recap in what it does, right? It allows you to track your fitness. So that tracks your running, walking, cycling. And actually, it says up to 40 other sports using the GPS. You can see your duration, your speed, how far you've been, calorie count, and a complete workout summary. You can get audio feedback if you have it turned on. Like I say, I do like that. I throw it in my pocket. I like to know how many kilometers that I've been out for the day. You can analyze your performance. Again, it keeps a full training log, so you can see how much you've trained each day, each week, each month. Again, it does sync with wearables, right? Like I say, it works with Bluetooth systems, heart rate monitors, Fitbits, Apple Watch, all that sort of stuff. You can set, you can set your time, distance, and goal, and then it'll. So let's say today I want to hike 10 kilometers, or I want to start hiking 10 kilometers a week. It will help you see those goals. Of course, it has social media interactivity as well. So, like, if you're one of those people that you prefer to put it on Facebook or Instagram, Google Plus, whatever. Oh, look, I hiked 10 kilometers today. I hiked 15 kilometers today. You can do that as well. Personally, I don't use those features. Plus, it's the cool thing is if you have friends that use the same software, it integrates with itself. And by that, I mean, so like it will add people to your hike and duplicate your workout. You can go on there. If you desire, you can leave comments for each other. You can add photos to it. So let's say you were on a really great hike and you really enjoyed it. You can snap a photo and it will keep the photo in your historic log. All kinds of neat stuff like that. All the data, of course, it's just a cloud-based software as well. So when your phone comes back into range, into cellular coverage, it will go on to... keep it onto Endomondo.com, and you can go on and you can look at all that data. So it's kind of neat. There's nothing more fun for me than see, oh, look, 3 years ago, this is where I was hiking. Right now, this is where I'm hiking. It's kind of cool. Like I say, it's kind of neat. I do have the yearly subscription. Again, it's like $29 a year or something like that. There are other software systems that you can use out there. You certainly don't have to use this one. Again, the reason that I like it and the reason that I recommend Hike Track software is when you go out there, it's nice to see how many, if you're a distance hiker or distance backpacker like myself, to see how far you're going. For me, with having lots of dogs in the warmer weather, I can't go on a 1 kilometer hike with my dogs and call it a day. I need at least 10 or 12 in order to get the dogs, exercised properly. Also myself properly. I do enjoy a longer hike, longer distances. So I like to keep track of all that stuff. The great thing is with like dog sledding and things like that is you can strap it on. You can see just how fast you and your dogs are moving when you're out there. And that's kind of a neat feature as well, to see at what point, what was the fastest time that you were traveling. Like with dog sledding, it can be up to 35 kilometers an hour. And that's pretty awesome to see that on your little thing there. So it takes some of the guesswork out of your hikes. It takes some of the guesswork out of your activities. So it's kind of neat. Like I said, it's a good way to track your runs, rides, walks, other workouts. It helps you reach your fitness goals. There's all kinds of software out there. We'll probably explore some more software in coming episodes. But again, this is my favorite only because it's the one that I use the most. So I want to thank you very much for listening to this half of the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. We are now going to cut to a quick break, and when we return, we are going to talk to a very wonderful and charismatic lady who happens to have climbed both summits of Mount Everest. She was originally from South Africa. She is a public speaker and motivational speaker, so she goes into businesses like Microsoft and really high-end companies, talks about her experiences mountaineering, not just on Everest, of course, and really, really charismatic, wonderful individual who I was, as all of our guests, I was very honored to share some time and space with. So, right after this, we'll be right back. We would love to hear from you. If you have any comments or suggestions or anything you'd like to say about the show or on the show, please get in touch with us. You can call us. Leave a voicemail at 866-248-1362, extension 300. Tweet us at BF Bushcraft. Send us a message on our Barefoot Bushcraft Facebook page. Or, of course, you can even send us a picture on Instagram. And we are, of course, Barefoot Bushcraft. So please, we'd always love to hear from our listeners. get in touch with us any way you can, and we will play your information on the air. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Robert Suter from Survival Central Limited. Check out our two great prepper survival websites. For the beginner, survivalcentral.ca, and for the advanced, more extreme prepper, prepperextreme.com. Be prepared, stay safe, and survive.
And we're back for this half of the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. And today we have our very special guest, adventurer and climber, Cathy O'Dowd, on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
So, Cathy, for some of us, for some reason, who may have never heard of you, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, that's a big open invitation. All right. I guess I'm essentially a climber and a motivational speaker. And the climbing tends to get reduced to one little box, which is first woman in the world to climb Everest from both sides. But I sometimes feel as if Everest is a bit of an anchor around my, attached to my ankle, because I've done so many other mountains. And Everest is the only one that anyone ever wants to talk about.
Well, that's interesting. So do you figure that it's because it's the most well-known, or it's because it was the most adventurous? I mean, I've heard many climbers say that Everest is not the toughest, especially by today's standards.
Well, yes, it's something about it being very well known and deeply embedded in our culture as this kind of symbol of grand achievement, climbing your Everest, whatever it is. It's certainly not the hardest thing I've done. And there is actually no answer to what's the hardest mountain in the world, because there's always another route you can try or a different season. So there are both mountains that have never been climbed. Still, a lot of them in sort of politically sensitive areas. But then on even the great mountains of the world, which have been climbed, there are more difficult routes. There are routes that are so hard, our generation just isn't yet good enough to do them, or the equipment isn't good enough. So the quest to climb a mountain, or the hardest mountain, is never ending. It's kind of one of those unreachable goals.
That's really cool. So now, what got you your start? I mean, you're from South Africa originally, correct?
That's right. And although South Africa's, not short of mountains, they go up pretty high, at least 10,000 feet. It's very short on snow and glaciers, the stuff that makes mountains really grand and interesting. And I grew up in the suburbs of Johannesburg, which is this big city on this flat grass plain. And my parents thought, going for a day walk was adventurous. I had no family background, but I discovered rock climbing at one of these teenage summer camp things, rock climbing and hiking and camping, and I loved all of it. And then I got to university, still in Johannesburg, and I joined the rock climbing club, and then I was off. Rock climbing is brilliant right across southern Africa. And then for mountaineering, we'd go further afield, either Central Africa, where mountains go over 5,000 meters, or to the Andes, because we could afford the Andes, basically. And there, the mountains are going over 6,000 meters and properly technical mountaineering.
Wow. So is there a difference for people who may not know between rock climbing and mountaineering? I know some people who've never done either, they don't really understand the difference.
There's very much a difference. And in fact, you could think of climbing as a little bit like running. There are a whole lot of different categories. There's everything from the 100 meters to the road marathon to the 200-mile ultra mountain endurance race. It's a very broad church. So rock climbing is the vertical or overhanging rock walls where you're hanging on with your fingers and your toes, and you've got safety ropes in case you fall off. Mountaineering is much more like extreme hiking, as in a lot of the time, the slope is on angle. In a photograph, it looks as if you're just hiking up it. But there's a whole extra level of knowledge that's about how you use crampons and ice axes, how you recognize avalanche-prone snow slopes, how you deal with glaciers where there may be hidden crevasses covered by snow bridges, how you navigate winter weather conditions, how you camp in winter weather conditions. So it's much more than just hiking, even though it can look like that in the photographs.
Wow, that sounds amazing. So much skill and knowledge. So how did you just study this, books? And of course, because when you started climbing, this was the pre-internet, right?
Oh my God, I know, it was so long ago. It was very different. There were no commercial courses, there were no guides. So you joined a club or you found a friend and you went with people who were better than you. It was a kind of apprenticeship system. And the downside was that you learnt the bad habits of the people you were following. It was much less structured than it is now. The upside, though, is you learnt. You were having to participate in decision-making, even as the apprentice, and you were having to kind of live with the consequences. Nowadays, on one hand, there are all these commercial courses. So in some senses, the training is much more rigorous. But on the other hand, so many people go out with guides where the guides make all the decisions that they're not gaining any real experience. And there's no shortcut to experience, to being out there and, things go wrong and you and your friends look at each other and go like, what do we do? And you make some choices and live with the consequences and solve the problems and come home and go, dear God, that was tricky, but we learned some stuff and we'll be better next time.
So it sounds like, that sort of style of mountaineering and that sort of apprenticeship is one of those things where that's where the real adventure is. I know we've had other guests on the show who said that modern day people, anybody with almost any skill level can be, and their exact words were, can be forced up the side of Everest. So I guess the way that you learned was sort of, like the School of Hard Knocks sort of system.
Exactly. And although it feels harder to start with, because you do have to sort of start on small mountains and plod your way from one to the next, it's much more useful in the long run because you have real skill and confidence and knowledge. Whereas now, I agree, Everest is available to almost anybody for $65,000. Obviously, no summit guarantee on that money, but you will get escorted up the mountain by a guide. A Sherpa will have done all the work. There'll be a fixed line from base camp to the summit. And you can go like, yeah, I conquered Everest, me and Edmund Hillary. But it's not exactly the same. And I do some work now with younger adventurers. I run a website called The Business of Adventure, which is designed to help people find funding. There's a lot of inspiration around at the moment, but there's not a lot of people answering the question of, yeah, that's fine, but how are you going to pay for it? So I set out to try and fill up that gap with a very pragmatic website. But I see a lot of young people, and they want to pay a guide to take them up Aconcagua or take them up Everest as the first step in their adventure career, but they learn nothing. You've got to have the skills. Nobody will give you an adventure grant to do something where you've just outsourced all of the real skill to a paid guide.
Yeah, I can totally understand and agree with that. I know, even myself, one of the first things that I did when I was getting into travel writing and outdoor adventure stuff is I hiked the Bruce Trail end to end. And I mean, that was like 850 kilometers. It took me, a couple months. And you do learn a lot. Like you say, you learn how to be task oriented, how to break things down. We even find that with children in summer camp, how many people are missing those basic critical skills because they have been removed from nature.
But I also think they're removed from nature, but there's also a different kind of approach. I see so many people now with bucket lists, and it's the 7 summits, or it's at the high end, it's the 14 8,000ers, or whatever it is. And I don't think people should be running around ticking off challenges, as they now get called. I think they should be running around collecting skills. And that may be paying for commercial courses, which, as I said, are now very good. It may be books, websites, YouTube videos. There's so much information on the internet. You just have to work out, what quality it is. And then they have to go out and do it, but do it for themselves, so that the buck stops with you and your friends, not with a guide. They should be collecting skills and experiences, because that's what will bring them big adventures in the future.
That's really cool. Definitely a really great philosophy on kind of adventure and outdoor skills. So now in that department, can you tell us about some of the most scariest, like the most challenging things that you were like, for sure, I'm going to die?
I have never thought for sure I'm going to die. And I'm proud of that, because that means something has gone radically wrong. Most of the time in the mountains or in any high-risk environment, things go wrong slowly. It's a cascade. One thing goes wrong, it reduces your options. The next thing goes wrong, it reduces your options even further. I think I've always felt that I could still see a light at the end of the tunnel, even if the tunnel felt like it was getting a little claustrophobic, like seriously narrow. So even I've been caught, for example, in a terrible storm at 8,000 meters on Everest. This was actually the famous year of 1996 and John Krakauer and Into Thin Air and all of that. We were the team that didn't go that night. So I was on the South Col of Everest during the famous storm. But even in a situation like that, or even on the Mazeno Ridge of Nanga Parbat, so we're trying to do a new route on an 8,000 meter peak, and we have 10 days of food, and we've now been up there for 12 days, and we still have a 2-day climb to get back down, and we've just blown our summit bid, and we're trying to work out what to do next. It never felt like I'm about to die. The one time I've made a huge mistake, I abseiled off the end of a rope while on a cliff, still at least 100 feet above the ground, which is not a good idea. But even that was like being in a car crash. My mind just went super calm, super quick. It feels like time slows down. And I'm like, okay, that was a cock-up. What are my options? There's a ledge. I might stop. No, hit the ledge, bounce off. Okay, next option. There's a tree. Grab the tree. Yes, that worked. Hold on to the tree really, really tightly and wait for my friend to come and rescue me. So, yeah, the shock of that sort of thing comes afterwards, not while it's actually happening to you.
That's an amazing story, but at least, of course, you survived to tell the tale. That's the most important thing. So now, with all these adventures that you've done you've traveled to all different, bunch of different countries and climbed a bunch of different mountains. Which one was the most satisfying journey? Like when you did it, you were like, "This is what it feels like to be alive." This, like, something that was your greatest achievement.
That's really hard to answer. Because any particular trip, it's not just about how dramatic the achievement was. A lot of it's got to do with how good was the weather, how much fun did we have, and how much did I enjoy the person that I was traveling with. So, in terms of kind of impressing strangers, okay, it would have been Everest, particularly the first Everest climb when I became the first South African to climb Everest. In terms of absolute climbing difficulty, the Mazeno Ridge of Nanga Parbat, even though I didn't get to the top, only 2 of our team of 6 got to the top. I was one of 4 who decided the risk levels had become so high that I was going to bail. But even the climbing I'd done, and frankly the bailing, which was 2 epic days trying to get off Nanga Parbat, it's probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But the best trips were actually ones where we chucked the plan completely. I don't know why I like those so much. There was one, we were trying to climb the nose on El Capitan, and it was the wrong time of year. It was way too hot. We weren't good enough, particularly me. I was aiding too much of it. I was climbing too slowly. I couldn't pull our damn haul bag because it was so heavy with water. I couldn't haul it on my own. And I wasn't having any fun. So we bailed about a third of the way up the nose and had some exceedingly scary abseils to get back down. And we just dumped our entire plan. And we went and bought a guidebook, this is just me and a friend, for the High Sierra Classics. And we jumped in the hire car and we went off and did these wonderful multi-pitch single-day rock climbs. No big haul bag, no multi-day epic. And we just drove from place to place, hiked in, camped, and randomly went and climbed routes we found in this guidebook. And it was this wildly spontaneous trip that wasn't at all what we expected to do. And I loved it. And I love the flexibility of it, and I love the spontaneity of it. So some of my best trips have been that. The ones where we didn't execute the plan at all. We did something else.
That's really cool. Now, you've taken all of this knowledge and all of this skill set for team building, and you've decided then to do motivational speaking and helping businesses grow. So could you tell us about that sort of transition of how learning to function as a true team, right, then translates into the business world?
Well, I think let's start by being completely honest about why motivational speakers are brought in to companies. And I'm not talking about Tony Robbins style, sort of rah, 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 you can do it motivation. We're actually kind of inspirational storytellers. We're there to entertain. We're there to break up the stress and the monotony of a super intense business conference. But the client is also looking for some takeaways that will actually be useful to people who have never climbed a mountain, potentially have never even seen a mountain, and frankly have zero interest in climbing. So that's quite a hard audience. These are high-level people, and I'm just going to take an hour of their lives to tell them about a mountain that they have no interest in. So there's got to be some level of value as well as a damn good story. And the value, I think, comes for me in two places. The one is talking team dynamics and leading teams in high-risk, high-stress situations with when pursuing these very big goals. And there is a certain similarity between the type of uber-confident, big ego, A-type achiever who becomes an executive leader of a multinational company, and the sort of people who put their hands up to climb 8,000-meter peaks in the Himalaya. It takes a certain level of self-confidence. But those people are often very competitive and not terribly good at collaborating with each other. And one of the challenges is getting those people to work together. And that's what interests me. I think that's the sweet spot crossover between what I do and what my corporate clients are doing. You can't actually change the external environment. You can't stop the storm, prevent the avalanche. But what you can do is make your team as effective as absolutely possible in dealing with those unexpected external obstacles. So, working on your team. It's hard because your team can't be reduced to a spreadsheet the way your logistics or your finances can. But it's absolutely the most effective thing you can do, because it's how your team reacts to stress and to setbacks that's going to set you apart from other teams or the competition. So some of the time I talk about that. And then the other thing that I talk about quite often, which is a lot of fun, is innovation. And there I'm essentially using the Nanga Parbat experience, new route on an 8,000-meter peak, to talk about what it means to try and do something that no one's ever done before, and how you make that plan, how you focus your team, how you deal with the fact that you actually don't know what's going to happen. And therefore you've got to keep your eye on the goal while possibly completely changing the plan as you discover what kind of as the project unfolds. That's hard. It's hard to stay focused and motivated and yet also stay flexible and open to rapid change of the plan. A really interesting challenge. So that's what I do with my corporate clients.
Wow. So when I had the opportunity when I worked in the corporate world to hear, people like yourself talk, I hung on every word because I was really passionate about about climbing. So, I kind of knew a little bit about that stuff. So it was always exciting for me. So now, you talk a lot about skill gaining and things like that. So you have to have for the things that you do, the places that you go in the world, you have to have basic like survival skills. So can you tell us about maybe when you had to use some of those skills where you're like, you know, I'm glad I learned this, whatever, starting a fire or pitching a tent in the horrible wind, things like that.
All right. Well, I think one got brought home to me recently, the importance of skills, and both modern and traditional skills. So the last big expedition I did was to ski Mount Logan. So Mount Logan is the second highest peak in North America, the highest in Canada. It's a really remote peak. You know, if Denali gets, say, 1,000 successful ascents a year now, Logan still gets well under 100. Nearly 20,000 feet high. And so we're climbing up the standard route, the King's Trench. On our summit day, we know that we're kind of in a race with a weather front that's coming in. And slightly sadly, we get to the summit, we lose the race to the cloud by about 20 minutes. So we get to the summit with no view at all, which is always a little heartbreaking. But now we have to ski back down to our high camp in what has become a whiteout. And this is particularly difficult on skis. Obviously, you move a lot faster on skis, but unlike being on foot, you can't pace because you're sliding on the skis. It only takes a small change of angle to make you move much faster on skis. And it's very hard to keep a straight line because your skis keep on pulling you into the fall line of the slope, and you have to do turns if it gets steeper. So it's difficult to do traditional compass navigation because of this problem of holding a straight line and working out your pace. But it's also difficult to do compass navigation because it is so cold. It's hard to hold the compass in your hand, hold the GPS in your hand. And with the whiteout and the big goggles, you can't see the damn screen of the GPS. And you can't keep your screen on all the time. It'll kill your batteries. So we navigated this using the GPS to set the bearings as we retraced the route we'd come up the mountain, and then using a compass to hold the compass direction, and we'd ski out what we would estimate to be 400 or 500 meters, and then we'd stop, check the GPS, check the bearing, reset on the compass. So those are two really quite different skills, being able to use the compass effectively and being able to use the GPS effectively. But it took the two together for us to get the group safely back down to our top camp and drop out from the cloud from where we could start to navigate by eye. So yeah, I found that a really interesting challenge and a great mix of the latest tech and the good old traditional skill.
It's always good to have a backup, I guess. Redundancy is probably a big part of what you do. Now, of course, what you do is very technical. So by technical, I mean it requires a lot of equipment. So how do you keep warm? And what things do you do to keep warm when it gets down to minus 20, minus 30, minus 50?
Yes, a lot of it is about the right equipment. And there is now some amazing fabrics available that make things lighter and warmer. But like everything, you can't just solve it by throwing money at equipment. It's about your use of it. So you also have to be very careful never to let yourself, if possible, get really cold. It's much harder to regain body heat than it is to lose it. So it's about the discipline of always changing up clothing, about making sure you're always wearing enough layers of gloves. My hands get really quite cold. I have to think that through. It's about being aware that every time you choose to take a photograph or look at the GPS or fiddle around with something or other, you're exposing your hands to cold because you can't keep the big mitts on, and therefore you're losing heat that will take time to regain. It's about the discipline of continuing to drink and eat because that helps to keep you warm. It's about having remembered to make sure that your thermos is full of hot liquid so that when you drink, you're drinking something warm, not something cold. So it's never enough just to throw money at kit. Then you just turn into one of those all the gear and no idea sort of people. There's still a lot of kind of personal discipline and management around how you use the kit effectively.
Well, that makes sense. And now I know, like they say that, how things have changed from when Edmund Hillary climbed Everest was with all wool clothing and leather and hobnail. And now, of course, we have all the modern technical fabrics. But either way, no matter how technical you are, people still die on those mountains, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, they don't need to be on the likes of Logan or of Everest to die. I mean, wilderness areas are dangerous. And we see people in summer who've gone out there in shorts and T-shirts and got caught out by cloud or caught out in the dark or lost, dying of exposure. We need to take wilderness seriously at every level.
I remember one of my first canoe trips as a commercial guide many, many years ago. I was probably about 2 days out in Algonquin Park in Ontario. And I remember coming across a couple, and the young lady was dressed in a skirt and really nice clothes and hiking in her bare feet, and she had her high heels in her hand. So she had attempted to go into the wilderness 2 days hiking in high heels.
Well, I was on Mount Rainier a couple of years ago, so that's incredibly accessible from Seattle. But, it's a 14,000er and it's got glaciers and crevasses. And at the park entrance where you sign in, they were having people turning up in, just normal trail shoes, asking where the hiking route was to the summit. People who just hadn't even realized that Rainier had any glaciers on it. So yes, in some ways, as the wilderness gets more and more accessible, and that's good because it makes people more aware of environmental issues, more eco-conscious. It also means that people wander out there without having done all that much preparation or research.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, that brings inappropriate danger to a situation. So now you did mention, about glaciers and things like that. So have you seen, there's a lot of talk in the world about how the climate is changing, good, bad, indifferent. Have you actually seen any of the things where you were here and then a couple of years you go back or a decade later you go back and things environmentally have changed?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen so much. My first mountaineering expedition, the Ruwenzori in Central Africa, 5,000 meter peaks. The only guidebook we could find was from about 1935. A third of the glaciers had been lost between that guidebook and when we were there in about 1991. In the Alps in Chamonix, my first alpine trip in the early 1990s, everybody used to go and train on the bottom of this glacier. And of course, the name completely escapes me. Begins with B. Okay. But it comes down onto the edge of Chamonix. And, I go back to Chamonix every couple of years. It is one of the great mountain towns of the world. And that glacier is retreated probably by at least a third. Nobody trains there anymore. It's just way too unstable. But if you want a spectacular one, and this is well worth visiting, it's the biggest concentration of glaciers in the Western Alps. It's behind the Eiger. You can get in there on skis in winter, which is great fun, or on foot in summer. 4 big glaciers meet in what is called the Concordia Platz. And one huge glacier goes out. And there's a hut that was built, 150 years ago, the Concordia hut. And at the time, the glacier was just below the hut. And every 10 years, the glacier is dropped, and they've put in a ladder. A stairway, one of these metal grid stairways. And that stairway is now several hundred meters high. And at every junction on the stairway, they have photographs from when the glacier was at the level of that stairway. And you climb up looking at these photographs, and then you get to the top, and you look out not just horizontally, but you can see the volume of ice that has been lost. That's astonishing for the impact of, this climate is changing, and that change is getting faster and faster.
Wow, that's incredible that, most people in the city life, in the day-to-day manufactured environment, they don't get to see that. How the climate has changed so much like that, like you said, when they're having to add staircases to a mountaineering hut. That's wild. Now, of course, many people will listen to this and think, geez, I would love to do some of the things that you guys do. So what would be your advice on someone who is just taking up the path and that says, I don't want to work in an office, I want to be a professional adventurer?
Yes. Well, it's possible, but it's not particularly easy. And in fact, most people who are actually professional adventurers don't call themselves that. They would call themselves sponsored climber or guide or a photographer or an outdoor writer, as in they've found a financially sort of remunerated skill set within the adventure space that then allows them to spend most of their time outdoors. But all of those things involve work. Or every adventurer spends a great deal of time inside, in front of a laptop, writing up blog posts, dealing with social media, pitching sponsors, writing trip reports, whatever it is. None of these is a golden ticket to just spend your entire time outdoors and, not be beholden to anybody. Earning money takes work. So the one thing is to take it seriously. And honestly, I think there's a lot to be said for having a proper job. Okay, I take that back. Having a proper job in Europe where they give us proper leave. I think you Americans have an incredibly hard time. Maybe not Canadians, but certainly US. They just don't get nearly enough leave. So a proper job if you can have enough time off. If you can't, yes, into the adventure space, take it seriously. It's a job. You're going to need to treat it like that. You're going to need to be very level-headed about money, how much you spend, how much you can make. And then it builds over time. I love the quote that says people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Build your adventure career over time. Build skill, build contacts, and build skills, outdoor skills and financial skills, things that will actually earn you money. And do it over time. And the other quote I love is about planting the tree. The best time to plant the tree was 20 years ago. The best time to have started your adventure career was years ago, because you'd be further down the line. The next best time to start is now. If you start today, tomorrow you'll be a day down the line, and a year from now you'll be a year down the line, and 10 years from now you'll be somewhere really interesting.
That's really awesome advice. Now, of course, there's always people who are interested in getting in touch with you, or the projects that you're working on, where you're headed next. So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I share my adventures on Twitter and Instagram at Cathy O'Dowd. I'm also on Facebook. And there's a website, cathyo'dowd.com. That's mostly for my speaking clients. And then for anybody who's interested in the path towards trying to fund an adventure career, I'm running this website, thebusinessofadventure.com, and I've got a weekly newsletter. Everything, money tips, blog posts, and information about interesting grants, adventure grants, crowdfunders, all sorts of useful, financially focused information. So yeah, please look me up on any of those platforms.
Well, I'll definitely sign up for that How to Pay for Your Adventures newsletter, because that sounds great. So now what's next for you? So you've done lots and lots of climbing, again, professional speaker service. So what's your next adventure? Where are you headed?
Well, I decided I was going to make 2018 the year of adventuring close to home. And it's for a couple of reasons. One was the realization that although I've done a lot right in the Pyrenees Mountains where I live in a tiny country called Andorra between Spain and France, and I've done a lot around the world, there's so much of Western Europe, even just the rest of Spain and France, that I have never explored. And there are beautiful mountains there. There are so many possibilities. I want to do more close to home that doesn't involve epic amounts of money and time and long haul flights and, carbon offset and all of this stuff. there is so much that can be found without it having to be some, epic official expedition. And honestly, it gives me a chance to spend more time in my rather lovely old stone farmhouse up in the mountains, and more time with access to the internet to build the business of adventure, more time to get out and do the speaking for my clients, which I enjoy, and it pays my mortgage. That matters. Builds up my savings and my pension. That matters. And my goals are personal. I've been rock climbing for 30 years, and I'm still trying to reach my highest grade ever. I mean, I'm a mediocre rock climber, but I'm mediocre with passion. So I'm really hoping that this will be the year that I red point 7A, which I think is 511D by American standards.
Wow.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of people in the world that climb much harder than that. But for me, 7A would be really meaningful. And I'm trying to do more ski mountaineering. The new skill set I'm going to be adding this coming summer will be canyoneering. There is some world-class canyoneering, big wet water canyons with fast-flowing rivers in them in the Pyrenees. And I'm going to be doing a training course to up my skill level with canyoneering. So I'm still investing in my own skill set. Yeah, it's just, so much to do.
Wow, that's incredible. What a wonderful and amazing life of adventure. It's so good to hear. To speak with someone who's always thinking ahead and always wanting to become better than they were yesterday. And I think that is motivation in itself, to always be better than you were a couple of days ago. Well, I want to thank you very much for your time and, taking your time out of your crazy busy schedule to speak with us on the show. And we look forward to having you on again someday.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much for listening. This brings us to the end of this week's Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. We always want to hear from you. We appreciate your listenership. We muchly appreciate your support. You can call us and leave a voicemail, 866-248-1362, extension 300. You can tweet us at BF Bushcraft. You can send us a picture on Instagram. You can tag us, hashtag Barefoot Bushcraft. Lots of great ways to get in touch with us. You can also, the best way is to leave us a message in the comments section of our videos or on Facebook. So once again, I want to thank you very much for tuning into the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show, and we will see you next week.